3,000 years before the invention of the microchip, and long before we mapped the human genome, a book of 64 symbols laid out the exact binary structure of our world. When the mathematician Leibniz first saw the I Ching in the 17th century, his jaw dropped. He realized the ancient Chinese had already cracked the ones and zeros of his binary code. Decades later, geneticists would find that the 64 hexagrams of this oracle perfectly mirror the 64 codons of human DNA. Is it possible that an ancient book of divination is actually a mathematical blueprint of reality? Let's find out. You're listening to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking.
I mean, it really is one of the most fascinating topics we could possibly cover.
Okay, let's unpack this, because today we are going on a deep dive into the I Ching, or, sometimes it's translated as the classic of changes. And our mission today is to trace the incredible journey of this singular text.
Right, we're going to start way back in the gritty reality of the Bronze Age.
Yeah, and then travel through the mathematics of probability and explore how it completely collided with Western philosophy. Before finally breaking down the modern cognitive science of, why an ancient oracle still feels so uncannily accurate to you today.
Exactly. And whether you consider yourself a strict skeptic, or maybe a seeker, or you just have a deep curiosity about how human beings process the world, this text is a masterclass in how we cope with uncertainty. I mean, I Ching has survived the rise and fall of empires, literal book burnings, and now the transition into the digital age.
So to start, the traditional origin story of the I Ching reads like a mythological epic, right? You have the legendary sage Fuji.
Oh yeah, the mythic founder.
Right. He supposedly sees a mythical dragon-horse emerge from the Yellow River with a map painted on its back. And from that map, he distills all the forces of the universe into 8 primary symbols.
Which is an incredible visual, honestly.
It really is. Then, centuries later, King Wen is locked in a dungeon by a tyrannical emperor. And while imprisoned, he combines those 8 symbols into 64 hexagrams and writes out the core judgments for each one.
It is a great story. But, textual critics treat those stories as prestigious founding myths.
So like a way to give the text divine authority.
Exactly. Modern archaeology paints a much more grounded picture. The core layer of the text, known as the Zui, didn't come from a dragon horse. It evolved directly out of the Shang Dynasty around 1250 BCE.
Wow, 1250 BCE.
Yeah, through a very physical practice called pyromancy. Royal diviners would take the shoulder blades of oxen or the bottom shells of turtles. And some of these could weigh several pounds and ounces.
Just massive pieces of bone.
Right. They would drill small hollows into the bone and then press a heated metal rod into those hollows.
So they're essentially subjecting the bone to extreme thermal stress.
Precisely. The intense heat would cause the bone to fracture, creating distinct T-shaped cracks. The diviner would then read the angles of those cracks as a binary message from the ancestors.
Like an auspicious yes or an inauspicious no.
Exactly.
They were looking for a lead indicator of what was going to happen with the upcoming harvest, or whether they should go to war, or if it was going to rain. But I understand how cracking a bone gives you a simple yes or no. How on earth do you get from a fractured turtle shell to a highly structured 64-symbol mathematical code?
Well, that transition happens as we move into the Western Zhou dynasty. The pyromancy gave way to a parallel method called sortilege.
Okay, sortilege.
Yeah, instead of heating bones, the royal scribes started using dried stalks from the Yarrow plant. They would mathematically sort these stalks into piles to generate specific numerical remainders.
And over centuries, these sequences of odd and even numbers were codified into the solid and broken lines that make up the I Ching's hexagrams.
Right, it was this massive crowdsourced data set of probabilities and outcomes.
And the fact that this data set survived at all is a miracle. Because in 213 BCE, the first emperor of the Qin dynasty ordered a massive book burning.
Oh, it was a cultural devastation.
Yeah, he wanted to unify political thought. So he ordered the destruction of all philosophy, poetry, and history. If you were caught discussing the banned texts, you faced public execution.
The imperial edict was brutal, but it contained a very specific loophole. It exempted utilitarian and technical writings.
Which meant manuals on agriculture, medicine, and divination were spared.
Exactly. Because the I Ching was legally classified as a practical tool for fortune-telling, it escaped the flames.
And we actually have physical proof of just how practical it was. Look at the Ma Wangdui's silk manuscript, which was sealed in a tomb in 168 BCE.
Or the Fian bamboo manual, sealed in 165 BCE.
Yeah, the Fian text is incredible because it shows us that professional diviners were using the I Ching for highly mundane daily concerns. Like Strip 64 is a reading about meteorology to see if rain will save the crops.
And Strip 86 is an inquiry into whether a sick patient will recover.
Doesn't it make the text more fascinating that it was actually compiled by anonymous court scribes testing probabilities over centuries rather than a single wizard on a mountain? It's like comparing superhero origin stories to actual gritty history.
I completely agree. It grounds the text in the desperate human need to survive. But to understand how those scribes actually pulled answers from the text, we have to look at the mechanics of the book itself.
Right, because the I Ching operates on a deeply complex combinatoric system, which is where I start to get a bit lost.
A lot of people do, yeah.
I know there are lines and they form hexagrams, but what is the actual anatomy of this binary system?
So everything in the I Ching is built from just 2 building blocks. You have a solid, unbroken line, which represents Yang energy.
That's the active, expanding light energy, right?
Yes. Then you have a broken line with a gap in the middle, representing Yin energy, which is receptive, contracting, and dark. You stack 3 of these lines on top of each other to get a trigram, or bagua.
And there are 8 possible trigrams.
Correct. When you stack two trigrams together, you get a 6-line hexagram. And there are exactly 64 possible hexagrams.
But how do you determine which lines to draw? Because generating those lines requires randomization, right?
It does. The most ancient method for generating the lines is the Yarrow stalk ritual. It involves taking 49 Yarrow stalks and going through a highly deliberate meditative sorting process.
I've read about this, and the math is just wild. You take the 49 stalks, divide them randomly into 2 piles, and then go through this elaborate sequence of counting them off by 4s, setting aside the remainders.
It is incredibly tedious.
Yeah, it takes 18 distinct mathematical steps just to generate a single 6-line hexagram. If you were doing a serious reading, you could easily be sitting there from 9 a.m. until noon. Why go through such an exhaustive process?
Because the complexity of the math creates a very specific bottleneck. When you divide 49 stalks by 4 over and over, the mathematical remainders are not evenly distributed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, in I Ching, a line isn't just yin or yang. It can also be a moving line, meaning it has reached its absolute extreme and is about to transform into its opposite. The math of the Yarrow stalks creates an extreme asymmetry. A moving yang line is exactly 3 times more likely to occur than a moving yin line.
Wow, that is a massive mathematical bias. Why does the system favor a moving yang line so heavily?
It is a direct reflection of early Chinese cosmology. Yang energy represents heat, aggressive action, and expansion.
Like fire.
Exactly. Ancient philosophers viewed this kind of aggressive energy as inherently unstable. It burns out quickly, prone to rapid collapse. Yin energy, on the other hand, represents the earth, coldness, and receptivity.
So it's incredibly stable and resistant to change.
Precisely. The math of the Yarrow method perfectly simulates this physical reality.
Okay, but during the Tang Dynasty, a completely different method became popular, the 3-coin method.
Right, much simpler.
You take 3 identical bronze coins and toss them 6 times. Heads is a 3, tails is a 2. You add them up, and that gives you your line. It's incredibly fast, but mathematically, every coin toss is an independent symmetrical event. You have a flat 50-50 probability distribution.
Yes, it completely changes the math.
So what does this all mean? If the coin method completely flattens the cosmic asymmetry of the original Yarrow stalk math, aren't modern users essentially hacking the ancient physics engine of the book?
You absolutely are. You're changing the base probability of the oracle.
Wow.
By shifting to coins, you strip away that subtle cosmological bias, where active energy exhausts itself faster than receptive energy. The coin method speeds up the consultation, but it fundamentally alters the texture of the universe the oracle is simulating.
So you get a symmetrical world rather than an asymmetrical one. If this book is built on the idea of constant change, asymmetrical flow, and lines constantly transforming into their opposites, how did Western science and philosophy react when they finally collided with this text? It seems fundamentally opposed to how the West views reality.
It really is. To understand that clash, we need to take a quick detour into metaphysics. In the ancient West, philosophers like Parmenides and Plato established a static ontology.
Meaning a philosophy based on things staying the same.
Exactly. Western thought often views reality like a house built out of permanent bricks. True reality is considered eternal, fixed, and unchanging.
Right. For Plato, the physical world of constant flux, like things growing, decaying, changing, that was just a deceptive shadow of the perfect static forms.
Change was viewed almost as a defect.
It sounds like Western philosophy treats reality like a photograph, trying to capture the perfect static image, while the I Ching treats reality like a movie, where the meaning only exists in the transitions between the frames.
That is a brilliant analogy. That is process metaphysics in a nutshell. Reality isn't made of fixed substances. It is a constant, self-generating flow.
Almost like the 20th century philosopher Alfred North Whitehead.
Yes, very similar to Whitehead. The universe never stops renewing itself. And even within Chinese history, figuring out how to read this flow sparked massive intellectual revolutions.
Like the prodigy Wang in the 3rd century.
Yes, Wang. He lived during a time of extreme political collapse, and he died of illness at the incredibly young age of 23.
Which is tragic, but his impact was massive.
Huge. Before he died, he completely revolutionized the psychological understanding of the I Ching. Before Wang, many scholars were bogged down in rigid numerology.
They treated the hexagrams as literal omens. Like if the text mentioned a horse, they looked for a literal horse.
Right. And Wang argued that this was missing the point entirely. He used a Taoist metaphor, saying the words in hexagrams were just snares to catch the rabbit.
I love this concept. The idea is that once you understand the abstract idea, you discard the image. You don't worship the snare. Your goal is to eat the rabbit.
He liberated the text from literalism. He essentially told readers to stop obsessing over the mechanics of the trap and focus on the deeper psychological truth it caught.
And centuries later, during the Shang Dynasty, the great thinker Zhu Xi took this even further. Because at that time, there was a major debate over whether casting Yarrow stalks was just a superstitious trick, right?
Precisely. Zhu Xi argued forcefully that active divination wasn't a superstitious trick at all. He classified it as a psychophysical spiritual exercise.
A spiritual exercise.
Yes. When you're faced with a terrible dilemma, casting the stalks forces you to step completely outside of your own ego. The ritual disrupts your selfish desires, quiets your mind, and aligns your awareness with the larger moral patterns of the universe.
Which brings us back to the collision with the West. When this Chinese movie of reality finally played in the West, it caused massive intellectual shockwaves and some wild projections. Let's talk about the mathematician Leibniz.
What's fascinating here is the need for a strict historical myth audit. You will often hear the claim that Leibniz invented binary arithmetic because he read the I Ching,
which is historically false.
Completely false. Leibniz wrote his manuscript on binary progression using ones and zeros in 1679. He overgave the math.
But then, decades later, a Jesuit missionary stationed in Beijing sent Leibniz a letter. And inside that letter was a woodcut of the 64 hexagrams arranged in a highly mathematical sequence.
Yes, Leibniz received this woodcut on April 1st, 1703. When he opened the letter and examined the solid and broken lines, he was stunned.
He realized that if you treat the broken yin line as a 0 and the solid yang line as a 1, the ancient Chinese had charted a perfect binary counting sequence centuries before him.
Exactly. He didn't invent binary from the I Ching, but he used it as prestigious historical validation. It proved to him that his pre-existing math was a universal truth, embedded in human history.
And if you jump forward to the mid-20th century, the collision gets even stranger. The psychoanalyst Carl Jung gets his hands on the text. In 1950, Jung wrote the foreword to the famous Bollingen edition. But he didn't just write an academic essay, he literally interviewed the book.
He sat down, cast the coins, and asked the oracle how it felt about being introduced to a Western audience. He received hexagram 50, the cauldron, which symbolizes spiritual nourishment.
And that reading transformed into hexagram 35, progress.
Right. Jung took this as a highly meaningful, welcoming response. And this direct engagement led Jung to formulate his famous theory of synchronicity.
The concept of meaningful coincidences that lack a causal connection.
Yes. Jung didn't believe the I Ching was magically predicting the future. He believed it was a psychological mirror. The fall of the coins and the imagery of the text created a space where conscious and unconscious states collapsed into a readable snapshot.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Once that translation hit the West, the counterculture absolutely devoured it. The science fiction author Philip K. Dick used the I Ching daily while writing his novel, The Man in the High Castle.
He didn't just use it for inspiration, he literally cast the coins to let the oracle decide what his characters would do next.
He surrendered his authorial control to the book, and inside the novel itself, the characters live in an alternate history where they use the I Ching to navigate their daily lives.
Right, the characters themselves use it.
But one of those characters uses the I Ching to write a banned alternate history novel. So he used the book to write a book about characters using the book to write a banned book. The I Ching essentially authored its own alternate history.
It's a completely recursive loop. It is a brilliant example of how adaptable the text is as a creative engine. But sometimes that adaptability led people off the deep end.
Like Terence McKenna in the 1970s.
Yeah, the psychedelic advocate. McKenna claimed to have derived a mathematical formula directly from the hexagram sequence, which he called Timewave 0.
He mapped the hexagram lines onto a fractal curve, right, believing it predicted an eschaton of infinite novelty.
Yes, but a mathematician named Peter Meyer analyzed McKenna's software and discovered a fatal flaw. Meyer found what he called the mysterious half-twist.
A completely undocumented arbitrary sign inversion.
Exactly. Without that artificial manipulation, the entire math collapsed. McKenna's grand cosmic timeline was essentially a programming error masked by the mystique of the I Ching.
Which perfectly sets up the #1 question for this entire deep dive. Whether it's Jungian synchronicity, alien mathematics, or the counterculture, why does consulting the I Ching constantly feel so uncannily accurate?
From the perspective of modern cognitive science, it comes down to apophenia. The term was coined by Klaus Conrad in 1958. Apophenia is the human brain's evolutionary drive to find meaningful patterns in random noise to manage uncertainty.
Like looking up at the clouds and suddenly seeing a perfect image of a face. Your brain insists the face is there.
Because our brains are optimized for pattern detection. So when you are stressed out and you throw the coins and read this ambiguous text, your brain goes into overdrive trying to force a conceptual match.
It's a combination of template matching and the Barnum effect. The poetic, ambiguous imagery of the I Ching acts as a psychological projection screen, like a Rorschach test.
Exactly. The user's subconscious actively fills in the blanks.
This leads us to how anthropologists view divination today. They don't view it as magic. They view it as an epistemic technology to cure analysis paralysis.
Right. Introducing a random variable, the I Ching forces your mind to reevaluate the landscape from a completely fresh angle.
Have you ever flipped a coin to make a difficult decision, and while the coin was in the air, you suddenly realized which side you were secretly hoping for? Introducing a random variable disrupts our cognitive loops, forcing us to evaluate our lives from a fresh angle.
It acts as an anti-bias machine. It forces you to consider strategies you would have naturally ignored.
That makes so much sense.
It does. And I want to leave you with a final thought on this. What if the true magic of the I Ching isn't that it can predict the future, but that it forces our hyper-distracted modern minds to stop, sit in silence, and deeply read the present moment?
Wow.
In a world of algorithms constantly telling us what to do, perhaps true wisdom is a technology that simply holds up a mirror.
If you found this podcast interesting, please like and subscribe. Thank you for joining us today.